Good evening. My name is Joseph Sipitz from the St. Joseph County Public Library. It's time for another Saturday night story time for adults. Today we'll be reading from The Life Treasury of American Folklore, published in 1961 by Life Publishers, and featuring paintings by James Lewicki. So the story we're reading today is called The Ghosts in the White House. But of course we'll be focusing on one particular ghost. So I'll be reading an edited version of the story. So I'll begin with the introduction. Even if dozens of ghosts had not been seen and heard there by reliable witnesses, the White House would still seem ideally suited for haunting. It is the oldest public building in Washington, D.C. Its cornerstone dated to 1792. And the decisions faced in its chambers have been dire enough to keep any patriotic shade troubled and restless. The number of apparitions has been correspondingly phenomenal. Here is a compilation of White House visitations. Of course, we'll be concentrating on just one. If you're wondering which one, he's that guy. Look familiar? He might look familiar. All right. Let's begin with him. But none of this ghostly retinue could compete with the conscientious shade of Abraham Lincoln. According to legend, Mr. Lincoln is quiet while the state is secure. But in time of war or crisis, he returns to the scene of his earthly trials, strides up and down the second floor hall, raps preemptively on any door, or stands by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. He is the White House ghost. In a series of early appearances, Lincoln's shade worked a severe hardship on John Kenney, the personal bodyguard of President Benjamin Harrison. Many a night, Kenney awoke with a start to the sound of boots in the hall outside his room. Each time he leapt up, revolver in hand, and ran out to defend the president. Kenney never saw anyone, and he never suspected the footfall was supernatural. But after a few months, he was so haggard with worry and loss of sleep that in desperation, he attended a seance in Baltimore. Lincoln's ghost was the first to materialize. Without preamble, the ghost assured Kenney that it was he who had been walking at night. "Mr. Lincoln," Kenney pleaded, "please don't do it anymore. I am guarding the life of President Harrison now, and you've got me so scared I cannot do my duty." Mr. Lincoln nodded, and thereafter John Kenney heard no more footsteps. Later on, Lincoln walked more and more often. Many appearances were recorded by Ike Hoover, for over 40 years the chief usher at the White House. One night, a valet of Franklin D. Roosevelt is said to have fled the mansion shouting that Lincoln was there and that he had seen him. The story circulated that during the Second World War, a distinguished foreign visitor answered a rap on her door, saw a gaunt ghost standing in the hall, and fainted. Still another Lincoln visitation, which happened shortly after the Roosevelts moved into the White House, has been described by Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. This is in quotes. "It was 1934. There was a member of the staff named Mary Eben. One afternoon, she went to the second floor. She couldn't have been gone for more than 3 minutes. But when she ran downstairs, she was terribly wrought up. She gasped that she had just seen Abraham Lincoln seated on his bed, pulling on his boots. On another occasion," said Mrs. Roosevelt, "Carl Sandburg, a man steeped in Lincoln lore, dropped into the White House for a chat with Franklin. The poet and the president soon drifted into the subject of Lincoln, speculating as to which room he had used to compose certain letters. Mr. Sandburg said he had always felt the work had been done in the Oval Room, so they decided to go there. While Franklin sat meditating in silence, Sandburg stood quietly at the window that faces the Potomac Flats, the very window where Lincoln often stood during the Civil War, gazing towards the front of Virginia. For fully 10 minutes, Mr. Sandburg looked out. No word broke the silence. Then suddenly he turned around and with great finality said, 'Mr. President, this is the room.' Late in March of 1952, President Truman and his family moved back to the White House following extensive repairs to the long-neglected second floor. The old wooden beams and joists had been replaced with steel members, old planking by new hardwood flooring. With this work, the original White House had been almost entirely rebuilt piece by piece, and the nocturnal rapping and pacing seemed to have stopped, at least for a time. With that, we say